What's up, guys? The Software Alpha here again. So today we're going to be going over basic data types as well as variable types in Java. So if you guys haven't seen my last video, I went over how to create a Hello World application in Java. So this will be an extension to that video. Basically, I'm going to create a series basically going through Java tutorials, going from beginner to intermediate and then advanced. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're going to post daily videos. Okay, let's get right into it. So go ahead and open up your favorite IDE of choice. Mine will be IntelliJ, as you guys know. I want to create a new project. Actually, let's go off of our first project, the Hello World app. If you didn't see the last video, you can go ahead and create a new Java project. But if you were with us in the last video, go ahead and open your Hello World app. Alrighty. Alright, so let's start. So a variable is nothing but reserved memory locations to store values. So this basically means that when you create a variable, you reserve some type of space in the memory. So based on the data type of the variable, the operating system allocates memory and decides what can be stored in the reserved memory. So therefore, by assigning different data types of variables, you can store integers, decimals, characters, all of this stuff in these variables. So the two main data types available in Java are primitive data types and reference, or sometimes called object data types. So in regards to primitive data types, there are 8 primitive data types supported by Java. They can be defined by the language and named by keyword. So let's look into these 8 different primitive data types in detail. We have a byte, a short, an int, a long, a float, a double, boolean, and a char. So for a byte is an 8-bit signed 2's complement integer. The minimum value of a byte is -128, and the maximum value is 127. The default value is 0. So byte data type is usually used to save space in large arrays, mainly in place of integers, since a byte is 4 times smaller than an integer. For example, say byte A equals 100 and byte B equals -50. For example, you can set a variable of byte A to 100 and a variable of byte B to -50. We can easily do this in Java by just typing byte A equals 100, byte B equals -50. So as you guys remember, a semicolon ends the statement. So now we've stored these values in these variables. So as you see, variable A, which is never used, is set to 100. And variable B is set to -50. As you see, byte is the data type. So whatever's in front of the A and B is the data type. So A and B can be anything you'd like. So this is just a variable name. So to declare a variable in Java, essentially all you need is an identifier, which is the data type, the name, an equal sign, and then the value. If I try to set these data types to something that is not a byte, say I set a byte to a string, I get an error because what was found was a string, the string. And then it says the required type was a byte because of what we're setting here. If I were to easily change this to a string, the error would go away. But we'll cover strings a little later. Let me undo that. Okay, moving on. So in regards to a short data type is a 16-bit signed 2's complement integer. The minimum value of a short is -32,768. The maximum value is 32,767. So a short data type can also be used to save memory as a byte data type. A short is 2 times smaller than an integer. The default value of a short is the same as a byte, which is 0. So for example, we can set a short of 10,000 and another variable of short, negative 20,000. We can easily do this in Java by typing short s equal to 10,000, short r equal to negative 20,000. So now we have 4 variables set in Java. As you see, it operates the same exact way as a byte, except we're changing data type to short. Moving right along, we have the int data type. Remember, guys, these are all primitive data types. So an int data type is a 32-bit signed to a complement integer. So the minimum value is 2,147,483,648. The maximum value is 2,147,483,647. Integer is generally used as the default data type for number values, unless there is a concern about memory. So the default value is 0, just like short and byte. So let's go ahead and create an int variable. Let's call it int a int equals, let's go with 100,000. Let's create another one. Let's call it b int. B int equals negative 200,000. So as you see, it's exactly the same as short, byte, except we have int. So for the next data type, we have a long. A long data type is a 64-bit signed 2's complement integer. This type is used when a wider range than int is needed. The default value is 0L. All long values have an L at the end in Java. So for example, we can set a variable a long. Let's create that now. A long equals, let's say 100. We can do 100,000 again, and then end it with an L. So the L tells the IDE that this is indeed a long value. Let's go ahead and set another one. Long b long equals to negative 200,000. So moving on to the next primitive data type, we have float. So a float is mainly used to save memory in large arrays of floating point numbers. The default value of a float is 0.0f. So just like how long values end with an L, a float ends with an lowercase f. So a float data type is never used for precise values such as currency. Let's go ahead and set one. Just go ahead and type float f1. Float f1 equals 234.5f. And there we go. We have our first float value. So moving on to double. The double data type is generally used as the default data type for decimal values. It's generally the default choice. Double data should never be used for precise values such as currency. The default value is 0.0d. Just like a float, you can end a double with a d, a lowercase d, but it is not mandatory. So we can go ahead and create our first double. Let's call it double d1 equals 123.4. But you can also end it with a d, like I mentioned before. Let's go ahead and create that. Double d2 123.4 d. So as you see, both of these forms are acceptable. It's mainly up to you. Moving on to our next primitive data type, we have a Boolean. A Boolean data type represents one bit of information. So there are 2 possible values, true and false. This data type is used for simple flags that track true and false conditions. So the default value is false. So you can set a Boolean just like we set the other primitive data types. You can type Boolean 1 equals true. We can create another one called Boolean 2 equals false. And then we can make changes to these values, like we can set 1 to false. So the last primitive data type would be a char. So a char data type is used to store any character. So for example, you can set a char to char, letter, let's go with A, and set it to a single quote A. If you guys have any questions on primitive data types, please leave a comment and I will definitely get back to you. All right, let's move on to reference data types. So an example of a reference data type would be a string. So to create a string, let's type capital S string, first string, that'll be the name of the variable, and let's set it to John Doe. So a string is basically used to store data that is made up of a sequence of characters, such as John Doe. It's made up of J, O, H, N, and so on. But what's different than a string than the rest of these data types is it's not a primitive data type. It is a reference data type. This string data type refers to the string class. If we were to right click on this string data type, we can go to the class. Just go to implementation. And as you see, we have the string class. If you were to try this with a primitive data type, this would not work. You can also create new variables using previously created variables. So I can create another string, let's call it second string, and let's set it to is 55 years old. Now I can create a new string using both of those strings. Let's call it third string. And I'm going to set it to first string plus second string. Now let's output this third string and see what the value is. Type system.out.println and pass in third string. Click this run button at the top. And as you see, it appends the string. John Doe is 55 years old. It's using first string and second string together to create third string. You can use different operations to perform different calculations with these variables. So some basic arithmetic operators would be your basic plus for addition, minus for subtraction, an asterisk for multiplication, a forward slash for division, a percent sign for modulus, a plus plus to increment, and a minus minus to decrement. Thank you guys for watching this video. That'll be it for today's lesson. Next video, we'll be going over more operators as well as more variable types. And we'll give you guys some real life examples on how you guys can utilize these variables. All right, guys, thanks for joining. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See ya.